Picture this. It's 170 AD, somewhere near the frozen Danube River. The most powerful man in the world can't sleep. Outside his tent, Roman soldiers stand guard against barbarian tribes. Inside, Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, sits by candlelight doing something remarkable. He's writing in his journal about the exact same anxiety that kept you awake last night. He doesn't know anyone will ever read these words. He's not writing for history or posterity. He's writing to himself, trying to make sense of the crushing weight on his chest, the racing thoughts, the constant worry about things he can't control. The plague is decimating his empire. His generals might betray him. His own son is showing signs of madness. And here's what will blow your mind. His solution to anxiety didn't involve conquering more territories or accumulating more power. It involved conquering his own mind. And the battle strategy he developed in those dark hours before dawn can end your anxiety today. The emperor who couldn't sleep. We imagine Roman emperors as fearless conquerors, but Marcus Aurelius was terrified, not of death. He faced that daily on the battlefield. He was terrified of the same thing you are. Losing control, making the wrong decision, failing the people who depended on him, watching everything he'd built crumble, not being enough. In his private journal, which we now call Meditations, he wrote with stunning honesty about his 3 a.m. demons. When you wake up in the morning, he told himself, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. This was ant-pessimism. It was his way of preparing his mind for reality instead of torturing himself with false expectations. But here's what's fascinating. Marcus Aurelius had every reason to be anxious. Unlike your problems, his actually were life or death. When he worried about making the wrong decision, millions of lives hung in the balance. When he feared betrayal, it meant actual assassination attempts. When he stressed about his son's future, he was right. His son Commodus would become one of Rome's worst emperors. Yet in those pre-dawn hours, writing by flickering lamplight, he discovered something that modern therapy is only now catching up to. Anxiety isn't about what might happen. It's about your resistance to what might happen. It's not the future that tortures you. It's your thoughts about the future. And thoughts, unlike empires, can be conquered. The discovery that changed everything. At 3 a.m., when the world was quiet and his guards thought he was sleeping, Marcus Aurelius made a discovery that would have seemed insane to his contemporaries. You don't have to believe your thoughts. This was revolutionary. Romans were raised to believe that thoughts were messages from the gods, that anxiety was a warning from the fates. But Marcus, influenced by Stoic philosophy, realized something different. Thoughts are just weather patterns in the mind. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he wrote. Realize this, and you will find strength. Notice he didn't say you have power over your thoughts. He said you have power over your mind. The difference is everything. You can't stop anxious thoughts from arising, but you can change your relationship to them. Think about your own 3 a.m. anxiety spirals. Your mind starts with one worry, then connects it to another, then another, building a catastrophic chain of what-ifs. Marcus called this adding things to themselves. Taking a simple fact and decorating it with layers of fear, interpretation, and projection until it becomes unbearable. He gave himself a direct order. Confine yourself to the present. Not because the future doesn't matter, but because the present is the only place where you have any actual power. The future you're anxious about doesn't exist. It's a story you're telling yourself at 3 a.m. The past you're ruminating about is gone. It's another story, fixed and unchangeable. But right now, in this moment, you can act. You can choose. You can breathe. The morning pages of an emperor. What Marcus Aurelius wrote in those early morning hours reads like the journal of someone in intensive therapy. He's constantly catching himself in cognitive distortions, challenging his assumptions, reframing his perspectives. But he had no therapist. He was performing cognitive behavioral therapy on himself 1,800 years before CBT was invented. How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, he reminded himself. Today we call this social comparison, and research shows it's one of the primary drivers of modern anxiety. But Marcus saw it clearly without any studies. When you're watching everyone else, you're not watching your own path. He developed specific techniques for when anxiety struck. When overwhelmed by the enormity of his responsibilities, he would break them down. In the morning, when you rise unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being. Not an emperor, not a savior, not a perfect leader, just a human being doing human work. When his mind raced with worst-case scenarios, he would interrogate them. What is this thing in itself? What is its nature? Strip away the story, the emotion, the projection. A potential betrayal becomes someone might act according to their own perceived interests. A military defeat becomes an event that has happened many times in history. Death itself becomes a natural process that all living things undergo. This wasn't denial or minimization. Marcus knew real threats from imagined ones. But he also knew that anxiety multiplies threats by infinity, making you suffer 1,000 deaths before the first arrow is even fired. The paradox of control. Here's what Marcus Aurelius understood that modern anxiety sufferers miss. The more you try to control, the more anxious you become. It's a perfect trap. You feel anxious, so you try to control more. But the more you grasp for control, the more you realize how little you actually control, which makes you more anxious, which makes you grasp harder. At 3 a.m., alone with his thoughts, Marcus wrote the words that would become the foundation of Stoic psychology. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But what does this actually mean in practice? He divided all of existence into two categories: things that are up to you and things that are not up to you. Your thoughts, your choices, your responses, up to you. Everything else, other people's actions, outcomes, events, the weather, the future, the past, not up to you. Anxiety, he realized, comes from trying to control the second category while neglecting the first. This isn't resignation or apathy. Marcus was running an empire. He couldn't afford apathy. But he understood that influence isn't control. You can influence outcomes through your actions, but you can't control them. You can prepare for battle, train your soldiers, develop strategy, all within your control. But whether you win or lose, not up to you. Modern anxiety is almost entirely focused on things outside our control. Will they like me? Will I get the job? Will the economy crash? Will my health hold? Marcus would say, you're asking the wrong questions. The right questions are, how will I conduct myself? What can I do right now? How will I respond to whatever happens? When anxiety woke him before dawn, Marcus had a specific practice. He wouldn't fight the anxiety or try to force himself back to sleep. Instead, he would light a candle, take out his journal, and perform what we might now call a reality check. But his version was far more sophisticated than simply telling himself to calm down. First, he would identify the specific fear, not the vague cloud of anxiety, but the actual thought causing distress. I am afraid my son will become a tyrant. Specific, clear, named. Second, he would examine whether this was within his control. Can he control who his son becomes? No. Can he control how he raises his son today? Yes. The anxiety immediately shifts from an unsolvable future problem to a present moment action item. Third, he would practice what he called the view from above. Imagine floating up, seeing yourself from above, then your city, your country, the world, the cosmos. From this perspective, how significant is this worry? Not to minimize real problems, but to put them in context. In the universe, This trouble of mine is a grain of sand on an infinite beach. Fourth, he would remind himself of impermanence. This too shall pass wasn't just a platitude for Marcus. It was physics. Everything changes. Nothing remains. The anxiety you're feeling, the situation causing it, your very life, all temporary. Finally, he would return to the present. What needs to be done right now? Usually the answer was simple. Go back to sleep, or if sleep won't come, use the quiet hours for study or planning. The anxiety might remain as a physical sensation, but it no longer controlled his actions. The enemy of anxiety. Marcus Aurelius identified the true enemy, and it wasn't barbarian tribes or political rivals. The enemy was what he called fantasia. The stories we tell ourselves about reality that replace reality itself. Your anxiety isn't about what's happening. It's about the story you're telling yourself about what's happening. He wrote, "Today I escaped anxiety." Or no, I discarded it because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. This is the key insight that changes everything. Anxiety feels like it's about external threats, but it's actually an internal process. It's not the event that makes you anxious. It's your interpretation of the event. A rejection letter becomes, "I'm a failure and will never succeed." A health symptom becomes, "This is definitely cancer." A partner's bad mood becomes, "They're going to leave me." The actual facts, letter, symptom, mood, are neutral. The anxiety comes from the story you add. Marcus developed a practice of stripping away the story to see the bare facts. He called it objective representation. When his mind said, "The Parthians might invade and destroy everything," he would reduce it to facts. Armed humans might cross a geographic boundary. When it said, "If I make the wrong decision, thousands will die," he would simplify, "My choice will have consequences, as all choices do." This isn't minimizing real dangers. It's seeing them clearly without the distortion of anxiety. A genuine threat requires action, not worry. If the Parthians are actually invading, you mobilize troops. If they might invade someday, you prepare defenses. But lying awake at 3 a.m. imagining invasions? That's fantasia, not planning. The discipline of desire. One of Marcus's most powerful insights was that anxiety is fundamentally about desire. Specifically, the desire for things to be different than they are or might be. You're anxious because you desire a certain outcome and fear you won't get it. Or you desire to avoid something and fear you can't. At 3 a.m., when his worst fears felt most real, Marcus would practice what he called the discipline of desire. Instead of desiring that his son be wise, he would desire to be a good father, regardless of how his son turned out. Instead of desiring military victory, he would desire to fight with honor, regardless of the outcome. Instead of desiring a long life, he would desire to live well, regardless of its length. This shift is subtle but revolutionary. You're not giving up on outcomes. You're just not enslaving yourself to them. You still work toward goals, but your well-being isn't dependent on achieving them. You still prefer certain results, but you're not destroyed if they don't materialize. Accept the things to which fate binds you, he wrote, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. This isn't passive resignation. It's active engagement without attachment. It's playing to win while being okay with losing. It's caring deeply while holding lightly. The Premeditatio Malorum. Here's something that would terrify modern positive thinkers. Marcus Aurelius deliberately imagined worst-case scenarios. Every morning, he would visualize losing everything: his position, his wealth, his family, his life. The Stoics called this Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. But this wasn't pessimism or catastrophizing. It was psychological preparation. When you've already imagined losing everything and realized you could bear it, what's left to fear? When you've mentally rehearsed disaster and found you would survive, where's the anxiety? This isn't about becoming morbid or negative. It's about removing the element of surprise that gives anxiety its power. What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, Marcus wrote, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. This is a reason for ensuring that nothing ever takes us by surprise. By imagining loss in advance, you remove its shock value. By contemplating disaster calmly, you rob it of its emotional charge. But here's the crucial part. This isn't worried rumination. When you worry, you're resisting the bad outcome, fighting against it mentally. In Premeditatio Malorum, you're accepting it as a possibility, even embracing it. If this happens, how would I handle it with virtue? Not, this can't happen, or this would destroy me, but this might happen. And here's how I would respond. The nature of anxiety itself. In those quiet pre-dawn hours, Marcus made an observation that neuroscience would confirm 2 millennia later. Anxiety is a physical sensation that we interpret as danger. The racing heart, the tight chest, the churning stomach. These are bodily sensations. The story that something terrible is about to happen. That's your interpretation. Today I escaped anxiety, he wrote, then immediately corrected himself. Or no, I discarded it. Because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. He realized that anxiety isn't something that happens to you. It's something you do. It's an activity, not an affliction. This is why fighting anxiety never works. When you fight it, you're adding resistance to sensation, creating what Marcus called suffering upon suffering. The original sensation might be uncomfortable, but the resistance, the fear of the fear, the anxiety about anxiety, that's where the real torture lies. Instead, Marcus practiced what we might now call acceptance. When anxiety arose, he would observe it like a scientist. Ah, here is that sensation again. My body is preparing for danger. But is there actual danger, or is this a false alarm? Usually, it was a false alarm. His mind creating threats where none existed, preparing for battles that would never come. The universal anxiety. One of the most comforting passages in Marcus's journal is his recognition that everyone feels this way. The Emperor of Rome, the most powerful person in the known world, admitted to the same fears that plague a minimum wage worker today. Remember that even if you were to live for 3,000 years, he wrote, or 10 times that, no one loses any life other than the one he is living. He understood that anxiety is part of the human condition, not a personal failing. The merchant worries about his goods, the soldier about battle, the emperor about empire, the peasant about harvest. Different content, same process. Different stories, same underlying fear. The fear that we're not enough, that we can't handle what's coming, that we're going to lose what we have. This universality of anxiety actually became part of his cure. When he felt anxious, instead of thinking, why me, he would think, me too. He was joining the human experience, not being singled out for suffering. This shift from isolation to connection, from my anxiety to the anxiety, made it bearable. The morning after. When dawn finally came and Marcus had to face the day he'd been dreading at 3 a.m., something interesting would happen. The problems were still there. The barbarians, the plague, the treacherous senators. But they looked different in daylight, after he'd spent the pre-dawn hours with his journal. The problems had been reduced to facts. The catastrophic stories had been stripped away. The fantasia had been exposed. What remained were simply situations requiring decisions and actions. Not the end of the world, just Tuesday in the Roman Empire. He would rise, perform his duties, meet with generals, judge cases, all while carrying his 3 a.m. insights with him. When anxiety arose during the day, he had his arsenal ready. Is this in my control? What is this stripped of story? How would I handle the worst case? What would a good person do here? But most importantly, he had the meta-insight, the understanding that his mind was not necessarily his friend. It would create problems where none existed, multiply real problems by 1,000, and torture him with futures that would never come to pass. Knowing this, he could hear his thoughts without automatically believing them. The modern application. Here's what's remarkable. Everything Marcus Aurelius wrote at 3 a.m. applies perfectly to your anxiety today. The content has changed. You worry about social media instead of Senate plots, about mortgage payments instead of military campaigns. But the process is identical. Your mind is doing exactly what his did, creating fantasia, catastrophizing, trying to control the uncontrollable. When you can't sleep at 3 a.m., you could do worse than following Marcus's protocol. Get up, light a candle or turn on a lamp, grab a journal, and start writing. Not about solutions. Anxiety doesn't respond to solutions. Write about what you're actually feeling, what you're really afraid of, what's within your control and what isn't. Strip away the story. Reduce the phantom to facts. Practice the view from above. Remember impermanence. Accept what might happen while working toward what you prefer. Most importantly, recognize that the voice in your head catastrophizing about tomorrow is not the voice of truth. It's just anxiety doing what anxiety does. The ultimate secret. In his final entries, written while he was dying of plague, Marcus revealed the ultimate secret to defeating anxiety. Amor fati, love of fate. Not just accepting what happens, but embracing it. Not just tolerating reality, but loving it. This isn't toxic positivity or denial. It's the deepest form of mental freedom. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Your anxiety isn't the obstacle to peace. It's the path to it. Every anxious thought is an opportunity to practice these techniques. Every 3 a.m. wake-up is a chance to develop mental discipline. Every fear that comes true is proof that you can handle more than you thought. Marcus Aurelius died in 180 A.D., probably of the same plague that had terrorized him for years. But his last words weren't about fear or regret. According to historians, he said, "Go to the rising sun, for I am setting." Even facing the ultimate anxiety-inducing event, his own death, he maintained perspective, acceptance, even poetry. His journal, never meant for publication, has survived nearly 2,000 years. Millions have found comfort in the 3 a.m. thoughts of a dead emperor. Why? Because anxiety is timeless, but so is wisdom. The techniques he developed in those dark hours before dawn work just as well in the glow of your phone at 3 a.m. The emperor who conquered much of the known world discovered that the only conquest that matters is the conquest of your own mind. The battle isn't won by eliminating anxiety. It's won by changing your relationship to it. The victory isn't feeling no fear. It's acting with virtue despite the fear. So the next time anxiety wakes you at 3 a.m., remember Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, sitting by candlelight, wrestling with the same demons. Remember that he won not by being fearless, but by being fear-aware. Not by controlling everything, but by recognizing what he could and couldn't control. Not by avoiding anxiety, but by transforming it into wisdom. If these ideas stirred something deep within you, if you felt the pull toward a more authentic existence, you're not alone in this journey. Subscribe to School of Philosophy and ring the notification bell to join thousands of free thinkers exploring the deepest questions of human existence. Each day we dive into the minds of history's greatest philosophers. Your awakening mind deserves nothing less.